everybody. Welcome to my session, Ready for Anything, Blend and Flip Your Way to Personalized Learning. My name is Stacy Lovdahl. I'm an innovative learning catalyst with the Department of Public Instruction, and I'm so happy that you guys have tuned in to this session with me today. And I guess let's just get started. Okay. So our session objectives are to explore some tools and strategies and best practices to implement flipped instruction in your blended or personalized classroom, whether it's face-to-face or virtual or hybrid, or I guess whatever 2021, 22 has in store for us, right? Hopefully it will be as normal as possible. So here's my little infographic, a little bit about me. I was originally an environmental science major and worked with business and industry to clean up hazardous waste. But when I entered the classroom, I was a middle school science teacher for about 13 years. And back when you had one internet connection and the projector was checked out of the library on a cart and was about the size of a suitcase. So I became an instructional technology facilitator and gradually moved into being a digital, an innovative learning catalyst for the digital teaching and learning division. And I've been doing that for about 3 years. So it's been a very exciting journey. And I can't wait to share with you how I flipped my classroom and some of the things that I learned along the way. So our agenda today is to talk about a little bit about the flipped philosophy, some tips for success, and then some flipping tools. But before we get started, I want to do one of my favorite things, which is hashtag connections before content. So I'm going to play this little video for you. Some of you guys may have seen this already, and I want you to think about how you're feeling about blending or flipping your classroom right now. And do you feel more like the boy on the left, at least left on my side of the screen, in the blue shirt, or on the other side of the screen in the red shirt? And if you're familiar with Jamboard, go ahead and click on the link for the Jamboard, or go to bit.ly / all caps BTJam510. And that'll open up the Jamboard. So I'm going to play this little video, and then we'll talk about the Jamboard a little bit more in a sec.
What do you want me to look for? Bigger.
There's a clue in your bag. Look in your bag, Gavin.
I already
No.
have a clue in my bag.
What is it?
Monster figure. Disney World. Ah! I'm going to Disney. Gavin, we're going to Disney World. I want to.
What?
Disney World. Let me find it.
Okay, so boy on the left in the blue shirt, pretty excited. Little boy in the red shirt, not so much, right? So if we click on the Jamboard or go to bit.ly / all caps, I'm going to go back to that, all caps BTJam510. And that'll open up this Jamboard. And if you've never been in Jamboard before, it's basically like a very simple digital whiteboard. And there's some tools over here on the left-hand side, but you shouldn't have to use them actually, because I've got some circles up here in the corners that you can just click and drag. So if you are feeling about flipped and blended learning like the boy in the blue, then just click and drag one of the blue circles. And if you're feeling more like the boy in the red t-shirt, then click and drag one of the red circles. And that's all there is to it. It's just to kind of get a little bit of a pulse check on how everybody's feeling at this point in time. And if we have a lot of participation, right, then we might actually run out of circles. So if you need another circle, like suppose all of these circles are all dragged down here into the spaces, then you can just click on a circle and see how the 3 little dots show up right here. You can click on it, click on that little stack of dots and duplicate the circle. Okay, or you can go over here to the toolbar and get the little circle tool and drag another circle and just create your own. So that'll create another one. And if you don't want a blue circle, you can just change the color up here on the toolbar. Oops, I guess you gotta change the color of the outline too. Okay, so that's all there is to it. And don't stress out if you don't, if it takes you a few minutes, you can definitely fool around with that. Okay, so that's just a fun thing to get started with. I'm always a fan of a good hashtag. Okay, tips for success for our session. So be present and focus. You guys have decided to tune in here to the BT Summit, and hats off. If I had a hat, hats off to you for carving out this time to invest in yourself, especially this time of the year, and take some time out for your own learning and to connect with other teachers, whether it's in this sort of pre-recorded digital space or however you're doing it. So thank you for doing that. So take notes, take some time, and try to be aware of and give yourself credit for taking this time out for yourself. Participate. We know that learning is a social kind of constructed activity. So I've tried to include some times here where we can kind of participate in this asynchronous kind of way. So jump right in and try to do that. And of course, wear all the hats. When don't we, right? So you're an educator. Definitely have that hat firmly on your head. You're also, you can put yourself in the shoes of your students and how they might experience the flipped or the blended classroom space. And then, of course, as parents, how are they going to see this and how will it be a little bit different for them? They've experienced a lot of emergency, pandemic, remote, virtual, hybrid learning. How is that going to play next year when this is hopefully going to be more of a normalized experience for them. Okay. So part 1, the flipped philosophy. So I want to play you a quick little video from one of the teachers that I followed way back in the beginning when I was first starting to flip my classroom. I really like the way she explains how she came to decide to flip her classroom and what she was looking for. So as you listen to her, it's Stacy Lovdahl, and no coincidence there, just same first name. And as she explains her reasoning behind flipping her high school class, jot a note in your notes of some of the things that kind of stand out to you about her reasons. And then we'll get back together in a couple minutes.
This brief introductory video is meant to welcome you to the flipped classroom experience. Before I jump into what I mean by the flipped classroom, I wanted to give you some background. It all started with me feeling really pressed for time in AP Calculus, which isn't conducive to building strong relationships with every student in the classroom. I truly care that each student's individual needs are met, but time is often an issue. So I asked myself, how can I make time for interactive discussions as opposed to a one-way lecture and create a supportive environment where each student's need is met? My solution? Eliminate lecture. Simple, right? So as I thought more about it, I looked to technology to help me solve my problem and give me the ability to offload the very teacher-directed lecture. And so now, instead of lecturing in the classroom, I create a video lesson for students to watch at home, which will equip them with all the fundamentals they need to have an engaging discussion and to problem solve in the classroom. More specifically, students will receive a blank PowerPoint handout, which is the same presentation that I am inking on in my video, and they will take notes on the PowerPoint as I am doing in the video. These notes will then serve for the basis for our in-class discussion as we hash out the details and connect all the dots together. In addition to having their note sheets filled out, there is some interactivity and monitoring built into the videos. Embedded quizzes will serve as learning checks and provide immediate feedback to the student, which can help cue them to replay a portion of the video or start a question to be asked in class. These quizzes will never be graded. They are only meant to help both me and the student determine what made sense versus what needed more clarification. Call-out boxes, highlights, and pointers will also help draw attention to important parts. The video might pause before I do a calculator activity, so students are encouraged to get out their own calculator and follow along with me for practice. In addition to me making video lessons, students will have assignments where they will be asked to make their own videos. Explaining a solution really solidifies understandings and helps students make connections to the larger picture. As teachers, we know very well that there is no better way to learn than through teaching. It's important to understand that the flipped classroom is more about shifting the teacher-directed activity home and making the classroom space very student-centered and student-driven. The student is given all the tools to be very resourceful and independent in their learning, and the classroom can become a more supportive, calm, and inspiring environment. Students are given ample time to do collaborative problem solving. The flipped classroom is all about giving students more ownership for their learning. Instead of constantly prompting them, my role is to guide, to listen to their questions, and join in on their discussions.
So I don't want to kind of pre-populate what you were thinking as you were listening to her video. So I hope you jotted some notes as you were listening. But a couple of things that always jump out at me when I listen to her talk is the idea that she was looking for some more time in her class. And the idea that the way that what she really wanted to do was to change the way the time in her class was being used from the one-way delivery of information, that one-way lecture and very teacher-centered lecture of material in her classes, to a more interactive discussion and ability to kind of form relationships with her students. So one of the ways that she thought of doing that was to start creating these videos that had some checks and some things built into them that would allow her students to follow along with her, but then would also change the way her class time was being used. So, and those things stood out to me because they were really, really similar to what I was experiencing when I was teaching middle school science. Whoops. Sorry about that. So this quote from Dan Spencer, who I also follow on Twitter, so you can Google or look on Twitter for him. Man, I keep doing that. And also Brian Bennett, one of the first people that I followed on Twitter when I was trying to flip my classroom, is that the flipped classroom is not really a methodology as much as it's an ideology. Almost every person who has flipped their classroom is looking for something similar in terms of trying to figure out a way to get more time in their classroom to do things with their students. In my case, coming from a kind of an industry background where I was investigating hazardous waste sites and collecting soil and groundwater samples and really using my science, degree in college to actually do science in the field. I really wanted to do science with my students. I wanted them to love science as much as I did. And while on the one hand, you do have to know science terminology and concepts and all of that sort of thing, middle schoolers don't have a whole lot of patience for that sort of thing. They really want to they really want to be active. And so, but I would run out of time in my 45-minute class period. So I really wanted to figure out a way to do more science with them. And when I heard about flipping the classroom, it really appealed to that idea in me. And I think that if you talk to math teachers and social studies teachers and language arts teachers, a lot of teachers who I know really came down to the same idea, as they were looking for more time to do things with their students, collaborative project ideas where they were doing the application in their classroom. And the flipped classroom idea gave them that opportunity to really recapture time in their class. Really good point here is that you'll see a lot of different ways to do it. It'll look really different in an English language arts class than it might look in a math class. So flip philosophy, like any good teacher, you will definitely have a good acronym to go along with it. So the F in flip could stand for flexible learning environment or flexible environment, where you're really maximizing the strengths of the remote or the home environment. And the in-person classroom environment where you've got people together to do something. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. And then L would stand for learning culture, where the instruction is learner-centered, and our job as teachers becomes one of design and curation and motivation. And I have to tell you, one of the most sort of heartbreaking things that I hear sometimes is when we use the word just in front of anything having to do with teacher, right? Because when we say just facilitating learning, think about all the work that goes into creating that classroom experience for kids that we are just facilitating. There is a tremendous amount of curation and design behind that. And then the motivation of your average 12-year-old is nothing to sneeze at, right? So, just toss that word just into the trash can. I, for intentional content, maximizing classroom time for strategies that benefit from people being together. I'm going to tell you a story about one of my bosses a long time. One of the thing that stuck with me, for just years and years and years, that totally encapsulates the I for intentional content. I'm going to take in also just a quick little bird walk here, as Jill Darrow would say, as far as into lecture getting a bad rap. Again, middle school science. I'm going to say sometimes you just need to tell people something, right? And it kind of sounds like a lecture. But you can't go on and on for an hour and a half. Kids will definitely not pay attention that long. But we do have to do a little bit of teacher talk. On the other hand, as my former boss would say, never hold a meeting unless you need all of those people in the same place at the same time for something that you need them to be with each other to accomplish. So personally, I think that's just because he didn't like meetings and he would rather send an email. But we have also all been in that staff meeting where we are sitting there thinking, this could have been an email. So there's a really good point to that. I think that lecture, on the one hand, is something you can do for by yourself. And that's the power of figuring out a way to make your videos something that's accessible to kids in the flipped classroom space. And that frees up time for those things that really do need kids to be together, where they can do labs and activities. Like this is a radioactivity or radioactive decay lab that kids were doing together. Now you're going to notice that the kid in the back corner is a little bit more engaged with whatever it is that, that he's doing with his friends back there. And maybe we need to get together and talk about the content a little bit more. But collaborative activities in science class are definitely something that we all need to be together to do. So that frees up class time to do it. The P in FLIP stands for professional educator. So the skills of the teacher, like we were talking before, that professional time that we bring to the table to understand what students need and whether or not it is something that's appropriate for the flipped space, or if it's something that is better spent in the classroom space where we're all together and we need the teacher and our peers to be together to do. So FLIP, flexible environment, learning culture, intentional content, and professional educator. One of the other things that I think is really true about the flipped learning philosophy is that it's self-differentiating. Students can pause a video, they can rewatch, they can let it go at full, just, watch it at regular speed. And they, once you kind of explain this to them, that they can slow it down if they need to, or speed it up if they need to, then they have control over what they're doing. Now, when we get a little bit further under tips for success, you do sometimes need to be a little bit explicit with them about making sure that they understand that they need to take that control over their own learning. But if they process, but once they understand that they've got that control, then they can take a little bit of ownership over how they're processing the information that you're giving them. I love that giving kids the information in a video doesn't require them to have the same reading level. In my experience, the textbooks that I was given in middle school science didn't really match anybody's reading ability, let alone your average middle schooler. So having my ability to make a video that explained it a little bit more appropriately was definitely a plus. It doesn't require giving kids homework that's something that they can't do at home on their own, or without having the input of maybe an older sibling or a parent. So it smoothed that obstacle over a little bit. It also helped with it being available 24/7. A struggle that I had a lot of times was with my 6th period science class and kids who were in sports, or sometimes who needed to check out early, right? They would have, if I was flipping my classroom, at least some of that information would be available to them in my learning management system, and they'd be able to access it without having to feel like they had missed something. So bottom line, flipping your classroom frees up class time and allows you to do different things in your face-to-face time that concentrate more on application, higher order thinking skills, and flipping allows students to process the information at their own pace. It gives them a little bit more control over the time, the pace, and the path that they take to master the information. Some things to consider before you start deciding what to flip. There are some things that are better face-to-face. Demonstrations, definitely. Storytelling lectures, definitely. I worked with a social studies teacher at my middle school who did this amazing lecture on the space race that kids were just on the edge of their seats for. So that was definitely, he probably could have made a video out of it, but it was definitely really, really good face-to-face. So what to flip? Direct instruction, some things to build background knowledge, reading or things where reading or listening or where processing speed might vary among your students. Another thing to consider when you're flipping is how are you going to check for understanding as the kids are listening, or are you going to kind of hold them accountable for listening to your videos? One really good tech tool to use is Edpuzzle. If there's a session here on this tech tool, then definitely tune into it, but there are some tutorials at the end of my slide deck that you can click on to learn more about Edpuzzle. Really, really easy tool to use. You can make yourself a free account, and it allows you to either bring in videos from places like YouTube and a bunch of other video repositories, and you can add your own questions into the videos. So it'll pause the video, kids answer the question. It can be either multiple choice or open-ended, and then the video continues. If you add your roster or you connect it to maybe Google Classroom, then as a teacher, you can see the kids' answers, and it gives you a little bit of data on how well they understood what the video is saying. You can also upload your own videos if you're making teacher-made videos. So it gives you a little bit of a exit ticket or check for understanding and a little bit of accountability. You can also just really easily use a Google form or some other kind of exit ticket. In my case, I used a notebook check. We practiced in class before I started them down the path of watching videos for homework. And we used an interactive science notebook. They take videos on the right side, and then they do some kind of a summary or a graphic organizer on the left side. And when they came back in the next day, I just go around the room and do a really quick check. Okay, and this is an example of how I did it. It was, the 3 R's: review your notes, reflect, 30-word summaries. Sometimes they'd have to do an illustration or a diagram or a graphic organizer, and then respond to a question. A friend of mine, Crystal Kirch, I think I had her on the other page, she did something called a WISC, watch, W-S-Q, watch, summarize, the notes, and then question. They'd have to answer a question. Okay, so this brings us to section 2, which is tips for success. So one of the things that was a little bit surprising to me was that kids, a lot of times, there were some assumptions that I made about students watching videos to learn. And that was basically that they knew how to watch a video. They all were carrying around their cell phones, and clearly YouTube is a thing, TikTok, all the things. So, but it turns out that sometimes they don't connect their real life to their school life. So, kind of going in reverse a little bit, I ended up making a video that was just some really quick tips that I wanted them to pay attention to when they were watching videos for homework. So I'm going to play just a quick little segment of mine as an example, and then we're going to do a little activity. And I know we're asynchronous and you're watching this as a pre-recording, but again, this is one of those things where even though we're not together, all together at the same time, I think it would still be pretty cool if we all jumped into this activity, no matter where you are. So anyways, tips for success first. How can you get the most out of your flipped classroom? Well, here are some tips for success. The key thing is that you can pause this video if I go too fast, you can back up if you need to hear something again, and you can re-watch the video for reviewing for a test or a quiz. So please make sure you back up the video if you need to hear the information again. Next, turn off your phone. Don't text, don't call anybody, just try to focus and get these videos done. I'm going to try to keep them all under 5 minutes. Close your Facebook, your email, your Skype, any other internet windows, and just get it done. You can always turn all that stuff back on once you're finished. Wear headphones so you can limit distractions. Take control of your own learning. And if you don't understand something, then take action. You've got access to the internet. You can back it up and re-listen. You can jot a question down and ask that question the next day in class. Your learning is under your control, so make sure you take advantage of that. Watch by yourself and not with your friends. That takes away a lot of the power of the individual pacing that goes with these videos. So watch by yourself. What happens if? And there's lots of ifs. So what happens if you... Okay, so that's a little bit about and you notice I did do this a couple years ago, so there are some things that are a little bit out of date, but the idea there was that I wanted to make it a video so that, when they forget, I could kind of replay it. I put it in my LMS so that they had access to it. I sent it home so that parents could see what I was asking kids to do and what I was asking kids to kind of keep in mind. And that was, the parents really appreciated that because that was helpful. I had one parent comment that she was walking past her son's door and she's like, I was like, what is Miss Lovdahl's voice doing coming out of my son's computer? Because she had gotten I had sent home like a little flyer, but it was disconcerting to actually hear my video in their house. It might not be as true now that we've had this year and a half of, a remote pandemic business going on, but back then it was unusual. Okay, so this next little section here, we're on slide 31, and but I've got a bit.ly on here, so if you don't have the slide deck, you can just go to the bit.ly. This next little section is a brainstorming activity, and you can see I've got 10 minutes on the timer because I'd really like you guys to kind of wrap your brains around what would you do if you were making this kind of a video for your students to start the year off next year. Okay, so what tips for success would your students need if they were going to start in a flipped classroom for your class, right? So if you go to bit.ly/BT, so capital BT, and then brainstorm, all lowercase brainstorm. And that's going to open up this slide deck. And this is a collaborative slide deck. So when you guys get in here, everybody is going to have edit access to the slides. And slide 2 has the directions. Okay, and there are a bunch of slides in here, but for the most part, they're blank. They have a little bit of sort of formatting to them, but there's a slide for elementary, K2, elementary 3 through 5, on up. And once you get to high school, I've kind of divided it up by departments, roughly. So scroll down and see if you can find a slide that goes with either your grade level, your team, your group, or department. If you don't find one that fits, then just duplicate a slide and make one. Okay, so no problem as far as that goes. Change the title if you need to, customize it however you want. Then once you find a slide that you like, make a list of tips for success that you would recommend and teach your students to help them succeed in the upcoming year in a flipped classroom, in your flipped classroom. So this is assuming that you either are flipping or you are thinking about flipping. Okay, so, it doesn't have to be that you're absolutely going to do this, but if you were, what would you teach your students in order for them to be successful? Okay, now that's really important that you think about this in terms of what would you tell your students? It's not things that you're going to do. Okay, so it's not going to be like, okay, Miss Lovdahl is going to make videos that are, less than 7 minutes long. Okay, because that's what I'm going to do. It's going to be it's going to be that I'm going to teach my students how to take notes when they're watching videos. Okay, so it's towards the students. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, under number 4, action item, decide how you will communicate this to your students. Will you create individual lessons? Okay, because kids need to be taught how to take notes. Or if you're going to have them do graphic organizers, or if you're going to have them, pause the videos. So how are you going to teach them to do it? If you're in a grade level and you work with 2 or 3 other teachers, are you all going to do this individually, or are you going to kind of, join together and, all flip 3rd grade together and kind of divide and conquer? So, how might that work? So I'm going to scroll down to one of the slides as an example. So if you're in middle school, you might change this and make this say, say you make this say science, right? You might even make it more specific and say, oops. Okay, so that might say, your actual, grade that you're teaching and your subject that you're teaching. And then you could delete this part right here and just say specifically a tip that you're going to make. Like maybe you're going to say you're going to make a video. Okay. Now I'm going to erase all of this so that this is blank. But that's just an example. Okay. Now, if you guys were here with me in real life, I would ask if there are any questions, but sadly, you are not. So I will just set the timer and erase all my mistakes and give you 10 minutes to just brainstorm as needed. And then we'll get back together. We're going to pick back up here and go on to the next thing. That slide deck, again, will live right there in the BT Summit folder. So if you didn't have a chance to finish, or you want to let a little time go by and check back and see what other people have done, it'll definitely be hanging out there until, I guess, I don't know, Google goes away or whatever. Okay, let's go on to this next thing. So before we leave this section on tips for success, I want to just dip our toes into a little bit of universal design for learning. 3 minutes, I've only allocated 3 minutes for this, and it's definitely not enough, but I want to give you a couple of links. So the first one, oops, sorry about that. The first one is a link over here to an article and some resources on executive functioning in online environments. And so I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to explore that. There's some really good videos and a lot of really good information in how we can help our kids with executive functioning and planning and organization. It is so difficult it's difficult for anybody, but we definitely need to help them with how to stay focused in these kinds of settings. And then the second one is an EdNC article, which I feel like it's a very easy article to read, and would be appropriate for us definitely as educators, but would also be really easy to send home and to our parents and our families, and how to help them help their students and their children with executive functioning skills in staying on task and being successful if they are doing any kind of remote learning. So I'm going to set a timer for 3 minutes, just 3, give you a chance to scroll through those 2 articles, and then we're going to get back to the last segment of this. Wow, that was loud. So we are done with that section. So we're just going to zoom on forward and go to flipping tools. So you guys, thank you for hanging in there with me. And I'm going to just zing through this last little section. I really like this section. And, but I do feel like so I hope that I've saved the best for last, right? So one of my favorite phrases that took me a really long time to wrap my brain around is, it's not about the videos, because we spent a lot of time about talking about sending videos home for homework. So how can it be not about the videos? But I guess the answer here is that it's really about what we do with class time. But on the other hand, if we're going to send home a video, it needs to be one that kids will actually watch and learn from, right? So how do we ensure that? Well, I want to start off with attention span. If we look at what kids actually watch in their real life, it's short, right? TikToks, super short. YouTube videos, super short. And that includes all the documentaries and TED Talks out there. The only thing that they watch that is long are games, right? They will watch a video game, but that's because of why? Because they're constantly getting that little hit, right? They're getting that interactivity and that little thing, whatever it is that video games do. So Molly, who is where we work together in one of the other videos, is, calls it that epic win, that chance that epic win is just right around the corner. So in the absence of that in your video, we've got to keep them short. So the research says that recommends about a minute per grade level. So that means for my 7th graders, a 7-minute video. If you feel compelled to talk to them longer, then the recommendation is to split it into 2 videos. And actually that can have some benefits, because if you split it into 2, say 4-minute videos for your 7th graders, then you can actually say, well, maybe you need to only rewatch the first half or the second half, because you might be able to split it into 2 segments that make more sense. And the second thing, or the last bullet down there, practice makes perfect enough. Don't obsess over making it super, super perfect. I've got one where the cat is constantly walking across the kitchen table. And I, at one point, pick the cat up and place him gently upon the floor. Honestly, I place him on the floor. The kids are convinced that I threw the cat across the kitchen. I did not throw the cat across the kitchen, but that's the video they remember. So don't worry about having to be perfect all the time. It actually makes you more interesting. So very important point right here. You matter. Your face matters. Your personality matters. A lot of times having videos from YouTube, or that perfect video, you're not having a good hair day, whatever it is, you might worry about all of those things, but actually kids want to see their teacher. So show your face, show your personality, write a script, use that script as a transcript. So, maybe that's going to help you with your closed captioning and, things you need to worry about for accessibility, but don't read it. Show that you're talking to your kids and be more natural. Remember that learning is active and social, so add those opportunities to do something interactive during your videos. It can be as simple as asking the kids to fill out their notes while they're watching, or to fill out a graphic organizer, but something to keep them sort of engaged while they're watching. I love this last video about this last tip about making a video so that you don't have to repeat things a zillion times. I definitely did this in my classroom with things like how to do your interactive science notebook. It got to the point where all I had to do was put my video up about how to take notes, and the kids would just roll their eyes and say, "We know, Miss Lovdahl, you don't have to show us your video again." And I'd say, okay, well, if you know, then let's do it that way. So it was just a reminder, and it saved a lot of time and repeats. So each and every one of my favorite phrases, right? Keep in mind that you have kids with needs. So closed captioning, upload your videos to YouTube so that you can get the closed captioning. Use your script to turn it into a transcript and use that for closed captioning. If you have videos that have closed captionings in YouTube, then when you import that into Edpuzzle will keep the closed captions. When you're using PowerPoint or Google Slides, keep in mind some of the things about contrast and font size. A lot of times those things make it more difficult to read. So I know we want things to be really pretty and fancy, but we also need to keep in mind readability. There's a really good link here, so I'm going to click on it. And it has some tips for creating quality videos that are accessible. And let's see, where's that link? Download this article. If I click on that, it will show up on the screen. What I really like about this, when I read through it, was I was like, this does not sound that hard. So I was very happy about that. Be clear about the goal or purpose of the video. Well, shouldn't we be clear about the goal or purpose of the video? So as you read through this, it makes a lot of sense, and it's things that are helpful no matter what. Okay, so take a look at that, and I know that I'm probably getting close to the end of my time, so I want to make sure I close up and have shown you everything that I want to show you. Having a bad hair day. It's okay to turn off the camera. I know I just got done saying that they want to see your face because you're their teacher, but we also understand. So use a Bitmoji. There are other ways to connect. If you don't need, sometimes using a screen recorder is not always the best way to make a video, especially if you have a lot of things to draw. So I've made some paper slide videos that work out really, really well. So there's a link here in the slide deck that if you need some ideas for other ways to make videos for your kids that would be helpful. Let me show you this video real quick. This is a really creative idea that involves using whiteboards in your
I've been teaching math for the last 5 years, and this is why I flipped my classroom. This is what my classroom used to look like. I was teaching to the middle.
Okay, now I don't know if you noticed what she did there, but she has a got some whiteboard from probably Home Depot or Lowe's or something like that, and have them, cut it up into sort of oversized whiteboard pieces, bigger than what you would give the kids to have whiteboards on their table, on their desks or whatever. And she set them up in her chalk tray and wrote her presentation on it. And then as she's talking, she's sliding them out of the way. Super clever. So if you have if you have some things that you want to teach where you need to draw rather than put on a screen, you could do it that way. And she's sitting on a stool in front of her class and has her camera set up on a tripod, probably her cell phone camera set up on the tripod. So really easy way to make a video. And I think that is it. So thank you guys for hanging in with me through this presentation. And if you have any questions, reach out to me on Twitter. I put my Twitter handle at Brave Neutrino up there at the beginning of the presentation, or you can always email me at DPI. I would be glad to help you out in any way I can, and enjoy the rest of the BT Summit, and good luck with the rest of the year.